Do not prod your vile countenance, which brings to mind a spoiled cask of wine. I will not tolerate it. Fetch what you came for as any upstanding person would, the Baron commanded. Upstanding, you say? The other man questioned. Silence, cur! Your glib tongue will be the death of you one day if you do not hold it. Your impudence has gone too far. Attend to me and keep your mouth shut. This must be done covertly, without a whisper to anyone, including your comrades. Lady Elfrida over there, he gestured with his thumb towards the direction of her tent, is already too upset that I have taken an interest in this wench, so there must be no commotion. Once you have captured her, you may do with her as you please. Wait for my signal. I know what I am doing, he sneered. You need not reveal your entire plan to a petty soldier. Pierre was a willing and skilled servant of the Baron, essential in his life of crime and brutality. He quickly gathered a group of fellow soldiers to aid him in carrying out their leader's orders. As the night fell around the encampment, they made their way to the monastery. Let us park our horses here and tread lightly. We wouldn't want to alert anyone and upset the Baron, Pierre directed. As usual, it would be a noisy affair, and if they weren't cautious, the pious crowd would soon be after them. With haste, they dismounted their horses and left them with one of their group. They strode up to the entrance gates, guarded by 2 Norman soldiers, who promptly let them in. Jacques, Pierre addressed one of the guards, where can we find the Saxon woman named Erica? She'll be in the monks' quarters, Jacques replied, but I suggest getting a kitchen boy to show you the way. Quietly circling the main building, they entered the refectory kitchen where lay brothers and beggars ate bacon and bread. With fear and shock, they watched as the troopers entered, but Pierre grabbed hold of one of the lay brothers. "Where is Erica?" he demanded. The Saxon understood the situation and played the fool to evade Pierre's question. Pierre unsheathed his sword and grabbed the Saxon by the throat. "Don't lie to me," he growled. "Lead us to her, or I'll run my sword through you. 2 of you stay behind and watch the cowards. The rest of you follow me. Move it, Saxon." He prodded him with the sword. The Saxon moved with swiftness through his body, leading them to Erica's room. "Now for it," Pierre said. "I'll use diplomacy and not ruffle this pretty bird's feathers. Is the cloak ready, men?" "Aye, aye, all's ready." Pierre rapped on the door, then entered briskly with no further civilities. But the moment Erica caught sight of his unpalatable countenance, she was aware that some mischief was about to take place, and quickly rose from her seat, her hand surreptitiously slipping to her bosom. Taking his helmet off, Pierre adopted a smooth and hypocritical speech, informing Erica that he had been tasked by the Norman lady who had been gracious to her not long past, to invite the Saxon maidservant to join her in their encampment, where she would be safe from harm, given her noble birth and genteel upbringing. But Erica was not taken in. There is an elusive quality to the timbre of sincerity which even the most skilled liar will fail to replicate. For it is frequently not the words one utters, but rather the tone of one's voice and the look in one's eye that reveals the truth of a matter. And when we've cast off this sincerity and honesty, our words will ring hollow, no matter how artfully we disguise them. Erica saw through Pierre's ruse, although she dared not betray such thoughts, and so she twisted and turned, seeking to buy time. "If you would be so kind, I shall need a while to gather my things before we leave in the morning. The servants will find a comfortable space for you to rest until then. You have my word." "I'm afraid such indulgence is not within my power to grant. Orders have come down from my mistress, and I must obey. Horses and an escort await, and so I must ask you to follow me directly," replied Pierre, his voice assuming its usual mockingly threatening edge as he stepped forward. "You nor any of your wicked comrades do not deceive me," Erica declared, unsheathing a gleaming blade from her bosom and pouncing upon him with the ferocity of a wild feline. Swiftly, 6 brawny hands subdued her, snatched the dagger, and smothered her cries with a soldier's cloak. Pierre then hoisted her, squirming, into his muscular arms and carried her down the corridor, across the meadow, and out the gates. The instant the Normans vanished, word of the heinous incident spread, and I was notified without delay. In the darkness, I stumbled across Skuggi, who brandished a sturdy cudgel, bow and arrows at his side, and seemed eager for combat. "Your Grace, is it?" he inquired. "Where are those Norman carcasses? Have they fled?" "I fear they have hastily escaped. Can't you hear their horses galloping beyond the walls?" "Of course I can. I can track them down like a bloodhound tracking a deer." "Then go after them, Skuggi, and find the maiden. Meanwhile I shall venture into the Norman camp. If I can plead with the fair Norman, these men may return the damsel. But Skuggi, go lightly with those martial instruments, or it will only incense them. The sword will be the death of those who wield it." "The admonition ought to be aimed at the Normans, father," Skuggi replied. "I am merely taking my bow and quiver, plus a fragment of wood. If I do not assail them with a few arrows before night's end, then the witch-hags of Adagil may take me for a simpleton and a craven." With that, he dashed off like an arrow. However, I witnessed him skirt the gates and scurry towards an oak tree bordering the wall. He scaled it briskly, edging along a branch spanning the wall. Then I heard him plop down to the ground beyond. Chapter 9. Villains Outwitted. Shakespeare once asked, "Drunk, and speak parrot, and squabble, swear, and discourse fustian with one's own shadow?" And in the darkness of the forest path, Pierre and his party stumbled forward with great difficulty, cursing and shouting as they went. The branches of the trees overhead only made the darkness deeper, and the path was treacherous, twisting and turning to avoid obstacles that made it little better than a cattle path. Skuggi, however, who knew the forest as well as the animals that lived in it, followed after them with ease. "Ah, ah," he exclaimed as he caught sight of them. "One good Saxon is equal to half a dozen of you." With his bow at the ready, he crept closer to the party, trying to decide the best course of action. "To kill a Norman is a luxury," he thought, "but I must rescue Erica." He took aim at the last person in one of the couples, knowing it would cause a stampede. But he couldn't be sure about hitting the villain in charge of Erica. "Well," he thought, "some risk will have to be taken, for I am but one." As he waited for the right moment to act, he was grateful for his familiarity with the forest and the cover it provided. As he approached them, he moved cautiously. Suddenly, the group came upon an ample gap in the treetops that was directly in their line of vision. The figure outlines appeared bold against the star-filled sky. "Now is my chance," Skuggi whispered, while he planted his foot firmly and drew back the string until it reached his shoulder. Suddenly, he heard a quick shuffling of feet coming from behind, and he promptly slipped into the thicket, his arrow still drawn. As the runner approached, Skuggi leapt out and aimed his arrow. "Who goes there?" he demanded. "Speak, or I'll let go of my shaft." "Hold there, Skuggi," came a calm reply. "Don't shoot your friend." "Bjorn Wolfe," Skuggi replied, relieved. "Just in time. I needed a Saxon or two. What brings you here?" "The same thing as you, my friend. Word got to me that a Norman was planning to abduct my young mistress. I knew he wouldn't stop until he caught her, so I kept watch every night at the abbey, hoping to intercept his scheme. But alas, he was successful, and he made off with her." "Don't give up so quickly, comrade," said Skuggi. "If you had come just a bit later, my shafts would have reached one or more of them. But with two of us, we can put up a good fight. They're about 200 yards ahead of us. 6 horsemen, with Eirica's captor being the second horseman on the right side. We need to rescue her. But how?" As they followed in the group's footsteps, the two debated on the plan. "As I was saying," Skuggi finally revealed, "I was going to act brashly until I heard your footsteps. It was always going to be a risky venture, but I wasn't expecting any assistance. Now I'm inclined to wait for a more favorable opportunity." "I also believe patience is key," Bjorn Wolfe agreed. "The risk of mistaking targets in the dark is far more significant than the benefit of possibly rescuing the young mistress. We must make sure we choose the right moment, or it can all go wrong." "That which must be averted, if feasible. But what is the probability? These Normans lack a fortified location close by in which they could confine her. I assure you they will not risk bringing her to their camp. A woman who previously saved her from harm and was savage towards a brute who offered violence. But they will locate some other place. Most likely leave her under the watch of half their force for the night." "An intelligent plan, Skuggi. In any case, it is better to wait patiently and perceive if a more favourable opportunity arises. So the duo trailed their rivals until they emerged from the wooded area, crossing a space cleared from the forest, which was previously tended by a Saxon farmer. They soon reached the woodland's margin, where the deserted and looted abode of the Saxon lay hidden. They dismounted, and Pierre carried Erica inside after lifting her down. They removed the cloak and lit a torch to reveal a compact, damp, unoccupied dwelling with 2 rooms. There was no door in the inner room, while the external entrance lay open and dilapidated. The floor, made of trodden earth, was hard. In the first room there was a crude fireplace constructed entirely of rough, unplaned stone, and the imposing chimney could be easily climbed by a man. Pierre dragged Erica into the inner chamber and procured a rough stone for her to sit upon. "Now, my lady," Pierre stated, "this is an icy, inhospitable location, but we'll alter that. I find no value in prevarication. I'm a true-hearted man and avoid falsehoods without justification. Therefore, I shall immediately inform you that my master adores your beautiful face. It's a fondness he possesses. He's a fool for it, as it undermines his prospects of an even greater prize. But that's an enigma you need not solve. Nevertheless, my master is a knight renowned for his bravery, and a few other vices not endorsed by the respectable order of Cistercians, or, for that matter, any rigorously adherent religious grouping. The aforementioned is a moot point, but my master has a duty to assist you in your distress. It would be wise for you to be on good terms with him. However, that is of no concern. Pursuing another's love interest is worse than partaking of another's meal." Thankfully, Erica was unable to comprehend much of the aforementioned jargon. "Men," he exclaimed, addressing his comrades in the adjacent room, "one of you shall remain indoors while the other guards outside. We shall depart for camp momentarily to gather food and drink. Endure this unfortunate situation for now. Let us conclude this matter promptly." They mounted their horses, leading the unoccupied ones with them, vanishing into the night. Skuggi raised his bow, directing an arrow toward the obscure forms that had vanished into the darkness. "My fingers are itching to try the effect of a shaft upon the carcass of that big, clumsy villain who leads the group," he commented. "Hold, Skuggi," Bjorn Wolfe interjected, placing his hand on Skuggi's. "We have already caught the prey. There is no need to ruin it." "I understand. A foolish individual acts without considering the consequences, but a wise one reflects before taking action. Nevertheless, as the gallows nods when a criminal passes by, the villain's time will come," Skuggi retorted. "Well, Skuggi, what shall we do next? We must capitalize on our opportunity," Bjorn Wolfe inquired. "Very well, Bjorn Wolfe. We must move around the back of the house quietly. In doing so, we may approach them covertly. The sentry outside will likely be caught off guard and unable to react when we attack him. Additionally, 2 against 1 is a favorable ratio," Skuggi responded. The duo snuck around the gable, peering around the corner at the guard standing outside. Fortunately, he was preoccupied, conversing with his colleague through the open door. "Are you prepared, Bjorn Wolfe?" Skuggi whispered to his comrade, who followed closely. Bjorn Wolfe gave no response, but raised his Saxon broadsword high in the air as a sign of his readiness. Suddenly, Skuggi darted around the corner of the hovel with the agility of a panther. He delivered a powerful blow to the back of the Norman's head with his cudgel, causing him to fall senseless to the ground. Without delay, Skuggi jumped towards the second Norman, who was taken completely off guard. He barely had time to raise his arm to deflect Skuggi's first strike, which sent him reeling against the wall. Bjorn Wolfe, who was close by, acted swiftly and decisively, cutting short any further resistance with a sweep of his sword. He then went back to the fallen Norman at the door and quickly finished him off. Meanwhile, Erica watched the commotion from inside the hovel, but failed to comprehend its significance. When the opportunity presented itself, she dashed out of the door and ran wildly across the open glade, hoping to reach the sanctuary of the forest. Her rescuers gave chase, with Skuggi's nimble feet quickly overtaking her. To her great relief, she soon realized that they were her loyal friends, who had taken great risks to free her from the clutches of the brutal Norman troops. As this was happening, Pierre and his comrades stumbled through the dark woods, completely unaware that they were being followed, and that their evil designs were about to be thwarted, just when they thought they had secured complete victory. "Well done, men," Pierre exclaimed. "I wonder what reward the Baron will bestow on us." "Don't hold your breath for gold coins, Pierre," one of his men replied. "We expected better pay and more spoils of war when we enlisted, but the Baron's penny-pinching ways are even worse than his meagre wages. Why don't you take charge? The whole company would welcome a new leader." "Hold on for a moment. There are others who are growing as weary of his whims as much as you are, and if you hear the sound of metal clashing between us, it should not be a total surprise. My temperament is not the smoothest, and one day he may behave like a bully, until we must resort to cold steel to settle it," remarked the Baron's contentious companion. At the encampment, Pierre went alone to relay the news to his superior. Once he entered the tent, he let out a noise of indescribable disgust upon gazing at the Baron, who had already consumed a lot of alcohol. "Hey there, Pierre! What's going on, you sulking scoundrel? Why have you come?" The inebriated Baron slurred, but even in his drunken state he noticed Pierre's disdain. "We have carried out your orders, Baron," Pierre replied. "Carried out my orders? By whom? What have they done?" "The assignment you gave me about the Saxon lady staying at the monastery." "That woman who everyone is making a commotion about?" "Yes, that's the one." "Ah, I recollect. Did you acquire her, Pierre?" "Yes, as discreetly as anyone could ask for. Nobody knows about it," Pierre replied. "Bravo, Pierre. You're a gentleman. Did you hear me, Pierre? You're a gentleman or a thief. I don't really care." The drunken Baron chuckled. "Take a swig, Pierre," he said, while offering him a pitcher of wine, which shook in his hand. Pierre drank it all. The Baron then looked at the pitcher with maudlin contemplation, as if he could barely believe what he was seeing. However, when he was under the influence, his argumentative nature emerged. A pint of good Rhenish vanished, Pierre. Vanished, and into a belly likely rotted from Saxon ale by now. Well, we'll make them right again with comforting sips of Rhenish, master. What's that, dog? Not with my Rhenish, Pierre. With slop, if you prefer, Pierre. Slop is ideal for a hog such as you, Pierre. Hey, do you hear me? Slop is what you're worth, hollered the Baron, becoming even more contentious due to his drunken excitement. Luckily, Pierre was sober, or the situation would have quickly turned alarming. Quelling his growing irritation, Pierre asked, "What should we do with this Erica, this Saxon?" "What do you know about Erica, huh? Do you have her, you wretched villain? I said, do you have her? Answer me," the Baron demanded. "I informed you but moments ago," he said. "And what do you mean by such rudeness, knave? Darn me, I shall not accept such impudence from a wretched soldier such as yourself. I must teach you that I am a gentleman. Mind your manners, Pierre, and keep your distance." With a clumsy attempt to draw his sword, Valdis continued, "Mark me, I won't abide it." "Pshaw!" scoffed Pierre, displaying a look of disgust. "What now, you clod?" Valdis bellowed, rising on unsteady legs and swiping his sword at Pierre, but failing as he fell forward onto it. His weight drove it deep into the ground below, but even as he tried to retrieve it, Pierre disappeared from the tent, howling in laughter. Valdis sunk back into his chair, and after staring blankly at the sword now stuck in the dirt where Pierre had stood, he failed in his attempts to recall what had transpired. His bleary eyes drifted shut, and he tumbled onto the ground in a drunken stupor. "The Baron is drunk and quarrelsome tonight, as usual," Pierre told his companions as he emerged from the tent. "We can do nothing with him until morning, and if he is not in a better mood by then, and does not make it right, someone else will lead us. For now we will finish what we have started. Let us gather some food and supplies and move somewhere more habitable, lest we remain in this wretched sty." Chapter 10. A Fruitless Embassy. In the depths of the abbey grounds, I paced with unease and nervous anticipation for the return of my dear friend Skuggi, yet with a nagging fear that his message might bear ill tidings. Midnight came and went, and dawn began to break upon the horizon, but still there was no news of Erica, and my heart grew heavy with anxiety. It was not only her physical safety that concerned me, but also the state of her mind, for Erica had been raised within a world steeped in the traditions and beliefs of her heathen ancestors. Her father, descended from a long line of fierce Viking warriors, held staunchly to those ways, and had instilled in Erica a strong and aggressive spirit,
as well as a firm adherence to his own pagan religion. On occasion, I had witnessed the fiery passion within her flaring to life. And yet, despite all this, there lay within her a tenderness and grace inherited from her Saxon mother, who was a devout Christian. At the dying request of her mother, I had undertaken the task of guiding Erica toward the Christian faith, but my efforts had been sporadic at best. Just when I had dared to hope that my work had not been in vain, this terrible invasion had struck. My attempts to show her the savagery and barbarism of the Norsemen, her father's forefathers, and the heathen ways of their religion, were confounded by this war of aggression launched by a Christian nation under the protection and approval of the Pope himself, with holy banners and sacred relics leading their armies. Christianity itself had been corrupted, turned into an instrument of bloodshed, merciless, fiendish, and shaming its professed tenets. And in the wake of these holy soldiers came unspeakable horrors that far surpassed any depredations wrought by the pagan Norse and Danes combined. Worst of all was that her father and brothers had been butchered, and their home reduced to ruins. Seeking sanctuary for herself, Erica had found nothing but more violence and brutality, as even the church proved no protection against the invaders.
It is beyond imagination to conceive anyone more completely stripped of all support than she was, and I was also anxious about the strength of her faith. I knew that there was a part of her that would not allow her to passively submit to these abuses. But where would her protest lead? Well, realizing that it would be more beneficial to work towards her rescue than to be immersed in these distressing reflections, I resolved to depart immediately for the Norman camp. It was a lengthy and arduous journey in the darkness through the woods, but I hoped that by steadily and resolutely moving forward, I would arrive at the camp by daybreak. Thankfully, I had not overestimated my abilities. As I drew near, I was challenged by the sentry. There was much discussion, and an effort was made to prevent me from advancing any further. However, due to my religious position, coupled with the fact that I was unarmed and that the sun was now up, I eventually prevailed, and I was directed to a tent not far from Lady Elfrida Hofsos's, who we shall simply refer to as Elfrida. After a while I received an audience with her, and shared with her all that I knew about the violence, as well as descriptions of those who were involved. When I described the ringleader, she had little trouble identifying him as Pierre. "Well, Father, I may as well inform you right away that this was what I anticipated. I warned this Saxon lady about the dangers she faced by remaining at the monastery, but I could not convince her to take my protection. I assure you, Your Grace, that this lady has suffered greatly during these battles, and she was undoubtedly terrified. Additionally, she was probably unwilling to join your camp, even though it was indisputably a generous offer on your part. Well, Father, I am not saying this to excuse my present inaction, but I can tell you, based on what I know and suspect about those involved in this crime, that it would have been easier to prevent the prey from falling into the lion's grasp than it will be to break into his den and take it back by force." "I pledge to make every effort, I assure you," said the woman, turning to her attendant. "Please provide our guest with refreshment, as he must be weary and faint." After speaking, she left without further notice. Returning half an hour later, she shared little hope of success in finding those suspected by her Count father. Despite this, she showed me great kindness, inquiring with anxiety about our treatment by the soldiers assigned to us. I suspected that her goodwill and protection played a vital role in our previous safety from personal violations. She asked numerous questions regarding our books, endowments, and the extent of our relief efforts for the poor and strangers. I was deeply impressed with her beauty and gracious demeanor, as well as her highly cultivated mind. I hastened my departure with as much dignity as possible. The truth was that I relinquished my hopeful thoughts of Skuggi's cunning and skill on this matter immediately upon arriving. Therefore, I anxiously sought to return to our monastery to learn of Skuggi's success. I quickly traversed the open plain and made my way into the forest with haste. I felt unsafe when my awareness detected eyes watching me suspiciously. I had only just entered the forest when I encountered the Norman vandal who had desecrated the sanctuary and made efforts to abduct Erica. This same Norman was the suspected cause of our current situation. Instinctively,
I made the sign of the cross and prayed for aid, for I understood that I had fallen into the lion's lair. "Well, monk," he uttered, "I can see you have been praying. It was wise to prepare yourself to prevent the devil from catching you. However, what brings you here so early? Give straightforward and immediate answers, or regret it." "I went to the encampment for specific business, my lord." "I already knew that, fool. Give me details. With whom did you conduct business?" "Only with Lady Hofsus."
"So I thought. What disturbed your saintly heart, old bald man? Speak now," demanded the rugged leader. "Our people had been wronged, and one of our refugees was taken by force from the holy grounds," replied the old monk. "Ah, yes, that was brutal. First, you sent your Saxon henchmen to murder 2 of my own, and then you trespassed into our territory to make a scene. Impressive indeed. So what reward do you deserve for your efforts?" "I believe a broken neck suits you best," the leader threatened. Without hesitation he attacked me, ripping my cloak from my back. He attempted to choke me, but I fought back with all my strength, despite my age. While he was younger, I was still able to outrun him, and he soon gave up. I thanked God for my escape.
Chapter 11. Ragnvald's defense of his castle.
In the words of Shakespeare, "Cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war." The Normans had been diligently preparing for an assault on the castle, which by no means could be described as a formidable stronghold designed to withstand a regular siege. Its main purpose was to repel the Scottish raiders, who would often pillage and steal cattle. The Scots would quickly return to their own territory, making it difficult for the Saxons to mount any effective resistance against them. The Danes also occasionally raided in our parts, but since Halfdane's conquest of Northumbria, we had not seen many of their incursions during my lifetime. Although the castle was sufficient for our hereditary foes, it was not likely to withstand the experienced and numerous forces now pitched against it. The castle stood on an eminence and was built of solid masonry, with a battlemented tower rising from its centre. However, there was nothing particularly unique about its design. A wall, which enclosed the castle, was built to protect cattle during emergencies. This wall was tall and fairly proportioned, but its length made it difficult to defend with only a handful of Saxon defenders. It's worth mentioning that, much like other strongholds in the land, the castle had a secret passage that was only known to Ragnvald's trusted followers. This underground passage could be entered only by the initiated, at a certain place in the circular stair that led to the turret. The passage emerged in a heavily wooded area some distance away from the castle. Within a few days, the Normans had equipped themselves with scaling ladders and long poles made from the forest trees to push the defenders from the wall. Mantelets, which were made of boards fastened together, were prepared for the attacking parties to advance behind without exposing themselves to the arrows and javelins that the defenders would hurl at them. The commanders wielded pavises, immense shields that ensconced the body from head to toe. The moment had arrived to launch the offence, and the Normans assumed battle formation, leaving only a few to guard the women and their encampment. The sight of these disciplined warriors advancing in step to the battlefront left a lasting impression. The attack plan and the meticulous deployment of troops attested to the proficiency of a seasoned general, one who possessed a thorough knowledge of the art of warfare. The Norman archers formed companies on either flank, their mission twofold: to provide cover for the attackers and to harass the defenders who sought to fend off the invading forces. It didn't take a military strategist to perceive that the outcome was hardly in doubt. The feeble ranks of Saxon defenders, thinly stretched across the wall, could hardly hold their fort against the horde of assailants. Only Ragnvald, among the Saxons, was adequately equipped to withstand the onslaught of barbed arrows that would soon descend upon them. His second in command, Gurmr, was garbed in a flaking coat of chainmail. The rest wore nothing more than leather jerkins. Had it been a melee in open terrain with equal numbers, the rough and hardy Saxons could have held their own. At a distance of 100 paces, any one of them could have slain a deer with ease. Had it been a clash of broadswords and pikes up close, these men would have fought like tigers. Alas, they were outnumbered 10 to 1 and boxed in a corner. They could not charge their adversaries and strike fear into their hearts with sheer bravery. They had to bide their time, waiting to be attacked. For every arrow and javelin they launched,
they'd receive 6 more in return. The leaders, Valdis, Reynard, Jules Reynard, and the others gathered around Hofsos, who issued progressive commands to the invading army, as if he was gifted with clairvoyance, anticipating every development of the intense drama that was quickly unfolding.
Now comes the order to attack. The assailants, with their shields mounted on rough wheels, steadily advance across the plain, while the archers fan out to the sides of the main group, creating the shape of a crescent. Gracefully moving beneath the trees, the archers approach the wall, using their arrows to trap the defenders in a crossfire. With composure, the Saxons stand ready for the battle, gripping their bows and pikes at the ready. The Norman archers open the attack by releasing a volley of arrows, but the distance is too great to be of much use. A few stray arrows do little damage and are easily avoided by the Saxons, who focus on the approaching enemy. As the attackers approach, they become more vulnerable. Upon a signal, a powerful volley of arrows from the Saxons comes hissing vicissitude and meets the enemy with deadly force. The pace of the invaders quickens in anticipation of close combat. They begin to scale the wall. The Saxons abandon their bows and take up their javelins and spears to repel the Normans' close-range attacks. The first wave of Normans is met with fierce resistance and is massacred by the unyielding defenders. Had it not been for the support from the Norman archers, never would they have gained a foothold on the wall that day. Now, in close proximity, the archers unleash their arrows on the wavering fighters. Many Saxons fall to the ground, pierced by multiple arrows. In the heat of battle, the Saxons falter, and the Normans start to swamp the wall. But Ragnvald races to the front line, his battle-axe in hand, and he strikes with a thunderous force, felling many Normans. With a shout of triumph, the Saxons regain the wall, exiling the invaders once again. But the reprieve is short-lived, as Ragnvald's attention is drawn elsewhere by the loud cries of the Normans. He glances over to see that they have gained a foothold on the wall and are overpowering his men, though Gorma valiantly fights off the onslaught, dealing deadly blows to the enemy. In an instant, Ragnvald joins the fray to reinforce his men, and the Saxons regain the upper hand. Their triumph, however, is fleeting, as the Normans surge back like an unstoppable tide, pushing the Saxons back. But one advantage is gained in the melee. The fighters are so closely mingled that the Norman archers dare not shoot, paralyzed with fear as they watch the fight unfold. Meanwhile, Elfrida and her maid Mireille watch the grisly scene from a distance. Ragnvald and Gorma fight back to back, shield and sword at the ready, cutting down their foes until the enemy quails before their might. "Mireille, what inexhaustible bravery these 2 Saxon chieftains exhibit!" exclaims Elfrida. "If ever there were heroes deserving of victory, surely it is now." "Our soldiers seem so afraid," frets Mireille. "See how wildly the Baron rants and raves at the base of the wall, taunting our men. Why does he not climb up and face these Saxons himself? How many lives must be lost. It's all so terrible," Elfrida laments. "These are our countrymen, but I confess a kinship with the Saxons, and that leader, defending his home with such valor, may God spare him from falling into our hands alive, lest he suffers at our hands." The struggle proceeds with increasing fervor. Baron Valdis, precisely as Mireille had depicted him, rants and flails about madly. "Down with him! Men, attack him in pairs or trios, approach him closely, displace him from the wall, toss something at him." Even so, he himself doesn't make a move to climb the wall. Hofsos also lingers hesitantly, giving directions for the assault. "Here, man," he tells a stalwart armed soldier beside him. "Heave up this long pole and aim a blow at the Saxon." The man elevates the pole and forcefully strikes Ragnvald's head. The blow leaves the Saxon reeling, teetering on the edge of the wall, endeavouring to keep his balance for a moment or two. But alas, his efforts are in vain, and he plunges more than a dozen feet into the castle yard, weighed down by his heavy equipment. At this unexpected development, the Saxons, in complete panic, raced toward the drawbridge that extends from one of the barbicans to the wall, intended as a safe avenue of escape by Ragnvald as a last resort. The Normans, however, intercept them and block off their route, and the Guardians, realizing that the drawbridge would be seized by the Normans, instantly retract it. At that moment, the Saxons frantically jump off the wall and dash for their lives like hares escaping the huntsman,
heading for the adjoining thicket. For a brief while, the fallen chieftain is momentarily forgotten as the Normans struggle to immobilize the fleeing Saxons. Meanwhile, Ragnvald lies in the castle yard, unconscious, bleeding, and senseless, without the strength to fight or flee. Gormr witnesses his leader's paralyzed state and rushes down to raise him up and remove his visor. As he does so, a loud sob emits from Ragnvald's parted lips, yet there is no further indication of life or awareness returning. During the events described heretofore, the Normans' attention is diverted from the leaders due to their obligation to vanquish the few Saxons who, defiantly refusing to seek safety by escaping, fight most resolutely until their final breath, guarding their posts. Now the Normans had set their sights upon the 2 Saxon leaders trapped within the castle walls. They emitted a savage cheer of pleasure upon seeing Gormr feverishly attempting to rouse his unconscious lord to consciousness. However, these efforts were for naught. Ragnvald's skull had been severely battered by his steel helmet during the fall, and Gormr quickly realized that no further attempts to revive him would prove successful. With his left arm wrapped tightly around his incapacitated chieftain and his broadsword sheathed in the right, Gormr made haste towards the castle exit, hoping to stall the Norman forces. Unfortunately, Ragnvald's weighty armor slowed their escape considerably, and before long the Normans had clambered their way into the courtyard and were hot on their heels. Gormr knew his task was utterly hopeless, and with a cry of pain akin to a wounded beast, he roughly dropped his lord to the ground and, consumed with fury, lunged towards the hollering gaggle of Norman soldiers, cutting down the foremost warrior with just one swift blow from his sword. The remaining attackers began to shy away from him, and to honor his valor, Gormr managed to lay 6 more corpses at his master's feet. However, their numbers were overwhelming, and Gormr knew the end was fast approaching. "It's futile. Oh, had I a mere 20 valiant warriors to stand with us now, we could fight these baying dogs off without trouble. May God forgive me for fleeing without honor, my lord. I would happily perish by your side, but it is your surviving followers who will benefit from my cowardice." With that, he bounded across Ragnvald's prone form, and with a single leap rushed through the terrace entrance and into the castle. The Normans followed in pursuit, but upon realizing they would have to enter the narrow portal one by one, they felt it was their duty to wait for their companions to join them so as not to risk attack from within the stone walls. This indecision led to their downfall, as the remaining band of warring soldiers instead chose to dole out further injuries to the fallen earl. As the gates gave way, Norman soldiers flooded the enclosure, followed by their camp followers. Elfrida and Mireille brought up the rear with the women. "What's all the commotion about, Mireille? Has the chieftain perished?" asked Elfrida. "I believe so, my lady. They're like wolves attacking their prey," Mireille replied. "It's a shame such a brave man had to die. If he's still alive, I'll ask my father to save him. But I fear it will be in vain," Elfrida said. "Look, my lady, he's alive and standing," Mireille exclaimed. Ragnvald had regained consciousness, and without his helmet, he searched the crowd, dazed and pale. "Don't kill him, men. Let's have some fun tomorrow, and then you can cut his throat if he survives," roared Valdis. "Can you hear what that monstrous creature is saying, Mireille?" Elfrida said. "It's terrible, my lady. Let's go. It's making me ill," Mireille replied. "Just a moment, Mireille. Let's take a good look at him. He's so pale. But what a noble and striking face, handsome and expressive like a true hero's. Only men who live virtuously and think purely possess such features. Compare that to Valdis's blotchy and bleary appearance. It's an immediate telltale and index of his beastly and foul-minded existence. My heart revolts at the sight of him. I'd rather encounter a vampire's touch," Elfrida said. Meanwhile, Gormr navigated his way to the circular stair leading to the tower and listened through a loophole as the order was given to spare Ragnvald's life until the next day. Thank goodness. Where there's life, there's hope. I hope a daring group can rescue him, Gormr thought. But the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors warned him not to wait any longer. He turned and began climbing upwards. In the darkness, he ran his hand along the wall until he felt a specific stone catch his attention. He applied pressure, and it slowly rotated, revealing an opening big enough for a person to slide through. Gormar disappeared inside, and the stone returned to its original position. Chapter 12. Elfrida Hofsos sets free the Saxon chieftain. With great effort, the Norman soldiers and followers were prevented from pillaging the castle. However, the promise of money and a limitless supply of ale temporarily pacified them. They lit bonfires in the courtyard and roasted sheep and oxen, leading to a grand celebration of drinking, singing, and revelry. The nobility was granted access to the castle, where they indulged in the same festivities. In the expansive hall, the leaders feasted and drank with little refinement compared to the commoners, except that they partook in wine and mead. "Well, Captain Reynard," spoke the Count, "is everything in order?" "Everything is in order, sire. The gates are secure, the grounds are explored, and I believe I can say that the Saxons are thoroughly defeated and terrified, unlikely to seek battle soon." "That may be true, but I fear we must be cautious in case they attempt to rescue their leader." "You can trust me, Count. I will maintain vigilance and will not rest until the sun rises. However, I suspect they will not attempt such a feat since they are so cowardly and decimated." Elfrida and her maids worked tirelessly and apprehensively to shield the castle staff from the drunken debauchery of the officers and soldiers. Their task would have been impossible without the watchful supervision and stern discipline of the Count, who viewed the wild behavior of his subordinates with contempt and remained ever vigilant both inside and outside the castle. Elfrida and Mireille, with the inquisitiveness of their gender and their growing fascination, explored the castle's chambers and were astounded by the numerous displays of elegance and refinement which they did not expect to observe in a Saxon lord's castle. Elfrida turned to her servant and said, "My curiosity is greatly piqued by this Saxon chieftain, Mireille. He defies the stereotype I held of the barbarous English barons, and now, as he faces his grim fate, my heart aches with sorrow for him." "Indeed, my lady," replied Mireille, "I cannot help but think that these Saxons would not partake in the debauchery happening in this manor and its grounds. But what horror awaits him tomorrow, Mireille? The thought alone turns my stomach. If only there was a way to set him free. My intuition tells me that this would not only be a merciful act towards him, but also a noble one for our people. To spare them the humiliation of witnessing such inhumanity would be a great service." "If it is your wish, my lady, I am confident that I can manage it. Paul Lazaire is on guard duty, and I can easily persuade him to cooperate. I could ask him to do anything, and he would comply without question," Mireille said with confidence. "But Mireille, that would endanger Paul's life." "I cannot allow that," replied Elfrida with concern. "If you insist, my lady, I can bypass Paul's involvement. I could concoct a sleeping potion that would quickly put the guard to sleep," Mireille suggested. "That's a brilliant idea, Mireille. We can add the potion to some mulled ale and get the Saxon to drink it," Elfrida exclaimed. "But how will we manage to open the prison doors?" "The thought of going down to those dark and cold cells frightens me," Elfrida expressed her apprehension. "There's no need for you to accompany me, my lady. I will handle it myself. I fear nothing, and it would be my pleasure to help this man," Mireille reassured her mistress. "I sense that this is the right thing to do, Mireille, despite the secrecy we must maintain," Elfrida said, determined. "Very well, my lady. Let us proceed. And as you said, we must use mulled ale. It matters not how murky it may be. These Saxons will drink anything," Mireille said with a grin. "But how do we deliver the ale to his cell without arousing suspicion, Mireille?" Elfrida asked. "We shall figure it out, my lady. One step at a time," Mireille replied with confidence. "I shall indeed convey it with ease, my lady. The naive one is foolish enough to believe I hold him in high regard. The amusement I shall gain once he ingests it will be unparalleled. To add to his joy, I'll present him with a small delicacy for supper. He will be overjoyed and likely begin to babble about love," exclaimed Mireille, who leaped around ecstatically. This particular endeavour delighted Mireille's wild sense of humour. Her jubilant attitude propelled her through any mission of this nature. However, when trapped in a challenging predicament, her nerves became frayed, and she resembled a bird cowering before a predator, unable to do anything apart from trembling and fluttering. "In all honesty, Mireille, the way you treat this poor man is awfully harsh," stated Elfrida. "It's solely a bit of fun, my lady. "He amuses me so much," replied Mireille. "Fine. Fetch him some food while I make him warm spiced ale. For once we must set our morals aside. But quite frankly, this noble Saxon deserves a better fate than what awaits him. I don't care if I allow the ideals of humanity and chivalry to win, even if it comes at the expense of our own people." "I'm ashamed of their cruelty and greed," declared Elfrida. The night was quickly progressing towards midnight. The commotion from the earlier moments of the night had vanished due to the inebriated slumber of the officers and soldiers. Mireille, mentally preparing herself for the humorous yet dangerous stunt she would perform, marched confidently through the halls, clutching a torch and carrying the meal prepared for her tentative admirer. "You don't deserve such an extravagant meal, false man," snarled Mireille, approaching Paul Lazaire, who stood guard near the cell where Rongvold was imprisoned. The sight of a concealed figure emerging suddenly at this time of night scared Lazaire, and he quaked uneasily before the unfamiliar and cloaked individual holding a torch. "Oh, sweet Mireille, you startled me. I believed it was a phantom, but now it appears to be an angel," exclaimed Lazaire. "You assumed it was that unattractive Saxon lady whom I detected you kissing, you deceiver," snapped Mireille.
"Pish, posh, Mireille. When will you forget? You know I desire only you. Come, kiss me and we shall be friends. I swear I shall not look at another Saxon woman until my dying breath. Now be off with you, if you please. You err if you believe I shall allow your lips to touch me when you so readily kiss any dirty harlot you come across. Now, my fiery little spouse. This is too much for anything, Mireille. You never cease with it. You will not have me for a spouse unless you greatly improve your manners. You shall have that dirty Saxon harlot for a spouse, and I shall take Jacques Leroux. He is a more clever man than you any day, and if I but wave my hand at him, he shall come running after me. You do not mean it, Mireille. Please do not be cruel. You may as well admit to loving me, for I know you do deep down, and you are only jesting with me as usual. I know you would not have brought me this lovely supper had you not thought highly of me. Is that not true, Mireille? Please kiss me and say you forgive me for that Saxon woman, and then I shall be overjoyed." Paul tried to land a kiss on Mireille's pink cheek. "Get away from me, or I shall claw you." Mireille violently pushed Paul away. "I will not share you with a dirty Saxon woman. Remember that, Paul Lazaire. You must improve your manners a great deal before you can kiss me, I can assure you." "There you go again, Mireille. I believe you will never forget about that Saxon woman, and you know it was only a prank. Now just eat your supper and stop your foolishness, or your brew will grow cold, and I shall depart," was the unresponsive response of the lady. Paul was unquestionably head over heels for Mireille, but he also possessed great affection for the steaming tankard of mulled ale and the victuals she had brought him. So he lifted the tankard to his lips and consumed a hearty drink. "Marvellous, Mireille," exclaimed Paul, smacking his lips in satisfaction. "This brew is nothing short of delightful. It warms my insides and brings joy to my day. I do declare, Mireille, you'll make me happy for years to come." "You're teasing, Paul," giggled Mireille uncontrollably, watching him guzzle the potion. "Now hurry up and eat your supper. I can't spend all night here. If you don't speed up, I'll be missed." With encouragement from Mireille, Paul hungrily devoured the food and finished the spiced ale to the very last drop. All the while he sent doe-eyed glances Mireille's way, causing the girl to burst with even more laughter. "Don't leave, Mireille," pleaded Paul as she made to depart. "The next watch is still far away. This tunnel creeps me out, especially since that terrible Saxon is inside. He clanks his chains and thrashes around, giving me the chills. Should he break free, there's no one around to help me." "Is that the cell in which he's imprisoned?" asked Mireille inquisitively. "Yes, but he's quiet at the moment. Perhaps he's listening to us talk, but sometimes I hear him wrenching at the chains with such force that I worry he'll break out at any given moment. The man is dangerous. You should have seen him fight. And there was another one who fled, a terrifying warrior." "Yes, I saw them too," responded Mireille, showing interest. "But are those keys on your belt?" "Yes, this one unlocks the door, and this other one the chains," confirmed Paul, holding out a rusty keyring for Mireille to see. "I wish this watch would end quickly, or I had a trusty companion to watch over me." "Good night, my friend," said Mireille, taking the empty tankard as she departed. She quickly made her way back to her mistress, who grew more anxious with each passing moment. "Any news, Mireille? How did it go?" asked her mistress feverishly. "Perfectly, my lady. Paul drank the ale and enjoyed it as expected. Those men always praise ale, what a horror. But I'm surprised it didn't make him sick." "Did you see the Saxon's cell?" asked her mistress impatiently. "Yes. Paul showed me the door key and the manacle key. He's chained to the wall, apparently." My heart trembles, as this dreadful enterprise would be both risky and improper if it weren't for the compassion that demands sacrifice. "Are you afraid to embark on this journey, Mireille?" "Not at all, my lady. I relish outsmarting those men who think little of us. It will be amusing to see their bewildered faces in the morning. And won't the Baron be livid, swearing at his men-at-arms? Oh, pray do not jest, dear child. Our mission is far too grave. I hope your bravery and frivolity do not forsake us before we accomplish our goal. Without heavenly assistance, we may never succeed. Before we commence, let us vow to Notre Dame that we shall recite 50 Aves and Credos and offer 20 silver pennies to the Holy Father at the next Romescott gathering. We shall see about that. But first, let us ready ourselves, as the draught will soon take effect on this sweetheart of yours. Nonsense, my lady. He is a dainty little man and simple to boot. I do but tease him. He amuses me too much that I cannot refrain from joking with him." These two delicate women crept along the lonely corridors, fortified to the best of their abilities. Elfrida was alarmed but resolute. Mireille, however, was initially sprightly, and may have relished the task of outwitting the hapless Paul Lazaire. But as the stakes grew higher, her volatile spirit faltered, evident in her many hysterical starts. Eventually they reached their destination, and as expected, Paul lay there in a state of blissful oblivion. He had quickly succumbed to the drug's sedative effects, and now slumbered soundly, breathing heavily. "Oh, dear," exclaimed Mireille. "Is he dead, my lady?" "Nay, foolish one, with haste, Mireille," Elfrida exclaimed, crossing herself piously. She could not express her fears in the presence of her maid, who was in a visibly vulnerable state. Mireille swiftly snatched the keys from Paul's girdle, and Elfrida struggled to insert the clunky instrument into the lock. She had to exert all her strength before the rusty bolt clacked loudly as it slid back. Pushing against the heavy oaken door, it slowly opened, screeching on its rusty hinges, causing the pair's nerves to flare into a frantic state. They directed their torch towards the cell's interior, where the captive chieftain was firmly chained, but stood tall with bared teeth, clutched fists, and a belligerent stance. His readiness for a midnight assailant was evident, and despite being shackled and ensnared by chains, he was prepared to fight to the death. Elfrida was startled by the fierce presence of Ragnvald, and visibly trembled, but Mireille completely lost her composure, grasping her mistress's arm and trying to pull her back. "Hush, Mireille! Quiet, I pray, lest our presence be uncovered," Elfrida pleaded. It was a vivid scene indeed. The two hesitant women stood before the cell, immobilized by the brutish demeanor of the captive chieftain, but determined to achieve an act of compassion. Ragnvald, too, was perplexed, sighting upon the torch's flickering light the forms of two delicate and diminutive ladies, with one of them exhibiting clear evidence of a noble upbringing and graceful disposition. The prisoner's muscles slowly unclenched, his chained hands falling to his side, their clanging sound resonating through the subterranean chamber. This further agitated the visitors, and Mireille, whose nerves were on the verge of collapse, let out a spontaneous yelp, leapt over the slumbering Paul Lazaire, and raced through the corridors, leaving Elfrida alone with the restrained chieftain. The soundless silence was shattered by Ragnvald, who spoke. "Do not fear, kind lady. I was awaiting a ruthless killer with steel in hand, yet seeing such a gracious messenger, I suspect you carry a message of mercy." "We are merciful, Saxon. We witnessed your valiant defense of the fortress, and if possible, we would like to set you free. There are those among us who seek to disgrace our own people with their savage intentions, and we would like to prevent that, and spare you a painful death." "Ah, mercy still exists in the hearts of women. I assumed such things no longer existed in the world." "This is impossible, Sir Knight, as long as honor and chivalry are the driving forces behind the actions of knights and warriors. Traits that cannot help but elicit sympathy from us, fragile women." "Will you then, fair lady,
have the courage to carry out your kind design, and release me, despite being an enemy to your people. I have weighed all possibilities, Sir Knight, and dare to try, if only my womanly strength can enable me. Then here is my right hand. May your kind heart be blessed with 10,000 blessings if you are able to free it once again." He extended his right arm, weighed down by the heavy and rusty shackles. Elfrida bravely stepped forward and inserted the key, but its stubborn catch was not easily released, and Ragnvald's shackles prevented him from reaching it with his other hand. Elfrida unravelled a lace collar from her shoulders and wound it around the key's sharp corners, which had previously wounded her hand. Then, once again applying her utmost strength, she was fortunate enough to successfully loosen the stubborn catch, and thus release Ragnvald's right hand. "Thanks to the heavens for an unshackled limb. My good right hand, too," he exclaimed, stretching it out to its fullest extent in pure ecstasy. "Now give me the key, kind lady, for I can remove the rest myself." And one by one, Ragnvald's shackles were taken off of his cramped and sore limbs, and he easily bounded free. Falling to his knees, he grabbed Elfrida's hand and placed a kiss upon it. "Tell me the name of my benefactress, lady, for it shall forever be held dear in my memory." "I am Elfrida Hofsos, and that was my maid," timidly replied Elfrida, blushing furiously.
"Elfrida Hofsos!" exclaimed Ragnvald, rising from his chair as if overwhelmed by the confession. Gripping her other hand tightly, he poured out his heart. "Do not be ashamed, fair lady. Your name, your beauty, and your generosity are a credit to you." "Alas, Sir Knight, some men would judge me harshly for deceiving my father and people to perform this deed, but I am willing to face their condemnation for the sake of humanity and chivalry. When we saw how bravely you defended your home and the misfortune that befell you, we could not help but pity you. This pity overpowered our weakness. That is why we have committed this act. I hope you will accept it as a form of amends for the violence and greed my people have shown. But please, Sir Knight, do not waste any more time. You must leave now before it is too late. Gentle lady, how can I express the depth of my gratitude to you? You risked so much to save me. I swear that I shall never forget this debt, no matter the cost. But the time is of the essence, as you have said. Farewell, and may your life be blessed with joy and happiness." "Wait, good sir. How will you escape?" "It would be safer for you to stay with us in our quarters, where we can help you plan your escape. Lady, please lend me your cloak to disguise my appearance. I know the castle well, and should have no trouble fleeing. As for proof, I will leave the cloak at the foot of the stairs leading to the tower, until we meet again." Before she could reply, he vanished into the shadows. Chapter 13. Baron Valdis balked of his revenge. At midnight, when the sun has long since hidden away and the land is bathed in darkness, the world falls silent. Even the towering mountains are hidden in the darkness, their outlines obscured. But in this silence, a plan is in motion. Brave sentinels, daring and alert, are approaching a castle filled with revelry and carousing. One figure moves quietly from tree to tree, taking refuge in the branches of a towering chestnut tree, surveying the last of the Normans who still continue their debauchery. Most are now sleeping, lost to the world. Another figure, silent and serpentine, slithers up the slope toward the castle wall, hidden by laurel bushes and hazels. The night owl screeches its warning, its call echoing through the darkness, signaling that the plan is in motion. Gormar has gathered the bravest Saxons to rescue their captive leader, ready for any danger that may come their way. Gormar and his comrades stand, hidden in the shadows of an ancient oak tree. Its massive trunk has stood there for centuries, a testament to the ages. Its barren branches tell the story of its decay, a slow process that has taken far longer than any human life. Just above where its thick limbs divide, a cavernous pit has taken root, leading down into the heart of the tree. "I believe there are no enemies keeping watch, and we may proceed," Gormar stated to his partner. With that, he ascended the tree and vanished into the shadows. Sliding down the trunk until he hit ground, he quietly cleared away foliage and debris, revealing a concealed hatch that he opened, uncovering a set of stairs that he and his companion traversed. Producing a horn lantern and flint, he kindled a light that cast its beams as they slowly marched towards the fortress. Not long into their venture, they were greeted by a recognizable voice. "Hail, Gormer! What business do you bring?" Recovering from the initial shock, Gormer found his voice.
"We sought a daring rescue, my lord, but it appears you've saved us the effort. How is it possible? We had little hope of finding you alive, let alone unshackled. A marvel, Gormer. I call it a true marvel, for it's as though I've returned from beyond the grave. But let us move quickly for now, lest we wake up to a grim reality." The three hastened back through the forest as Gormer let out shrill calls that the rest of the Saxon clan knew well. One by one they congregated at the designated spot, and once they surveyed their leader alive and well, their displays of jubilation were almost excessive. Several danced about wildly, like denizens of the wilderness, as they listened intently to how Ragnvald had found his way to freedom. Betrayed by 2 Norman women, they had crept into his cell at night and loosened his manacles, with Ragnvald emphasizing that no harm was to come to these women or the Norman lady, Hofsos's daughter. He also imposed the strictest secrecy about their liberators on his followers. At dawn, the Norman men-at-arms mustered in the castle yard, including many mercenaries seeking loot. Gold was distributed to those who fought for their leader and refrained from pillaging. 3/4 of the army then marched north to join the destructive force ravaging northern England and the Scottish borders. The brutal slaughter claimed the lives of over 200,000 Saxons. Elfrida and Mireille woke early, unable to rest during the anxious night. With courage, they searched the castle for any sign of the escaped Saxon amidst the clamour of the soldiers. "The tower is our only hope," Elfrida declared, and they scrambled up its winding stair in the dim light. At the top, they found the cloak Elfrida had lent to the fugitive, prompting her memory of his parting words. They saw Valdis, Pierre, and their cohorts setting up a cruel spectacle below, complete with fire and torture tools. From the battlements, Elfrida and Mireille watched in horror.
"Valdis," spoke up Pierre, "do you not see the grand lady observing us? We shall soon find a sport that will make the delicate damsel sick, I guarantee it. I desire to hold her in place and make her witness, whether she likes it or not." "You shall not win any gracious smiles with this work, my lord. It would have been best to have done it elsewhere," cautioned Pierre. "I care not for her smiles nor her tears. I have the means to control her, and I will do so as I please. Her Highness or her father will be at my feet soon enough. You shall see, Pierre, but let us go fetch Samson with 6 men." They hurried to the cells to fetch their prisoner. "Elfrida, I feel faint," whispered Mireille. "Do you think the Saxon has escaped? He could never scale that wall. If he is hiding on the roof or in a cell, they will capture him for certain." "If I could crush the Baron's head with these stones, I would do it willingly," spat Mireille. Suddenly, a wild shout echoed up the stairs. "Oh, Mireille, please let me sit," pleaded Elfrida. "They found him, I fear. This is unbearable." A soldier was seen dashing from the castle door and racing across the courtyard and through the gate. This was the sentry who replaced Paul Lazaire. When he discovered the prisoner gone, he fled for his life and was never seen again. A hue and cry erupted. The castle was searched with great thoroughness. Valdis's fury stood like that of a beast denied its prey. Needless to say, I rejoiced when Skuggi brought me the fantastic news of Ragnvald's deliverance. It was almost a miracle, and I gave praise to God for it. Skuggi always seemed to possess information regarding the movements of both the Normans and the Saxons, and he was always on the alert, constantly in conference with the outlaws by night. With great fortune he earned the favour of the Normans and became privy to their deepest secrets. Regrettably, Valdis and his men took up residence at the abbey, which caused me to fear for Erikor's safety. Consequently, I tasked Skuggi with delivering this letter to Ragnvald, who had rediscovered a retreat with a modicum of safety from harm's way. My concern for Eirika's well-being mounted as Valdis established himself in such close proximity. To the honourable and brave Alderman Ragnvald I convey my greetings. Your commitment to the noble cause of protecting and supporting your unfortunate and distressed countrymen in these perilous times has assured me of your virtue and valour. Therefore I humbly implore you to contemplate the unfortunate circumstances that have befallen the late Thane Beowulf's household. His lands, similar to yours, have been confiscated, but the situation has worsened as he and his son were slain while they tried to prevent their property from being pillaged by the Normans. His daughter, the elegant and accomplished Erica, fled to these very cloisters for asylum. However, the holiness of this sanctuary was caught up in the general destruction, overrun by violent individuals who remain in control and whose disregard for sacred places is comparable to the behavior of fiends. Their cruelty and lust spared neither the young nor old. Indeed, Erica was a victim, and had not her captors been defeated through a combination of guile and bravery, she might still be under their control, like a bird trapped in a net. Unfortunately, there exists no place of absolute security for her, as the remaining housecarls and fiefs are outlaws, scattered in the wilderness. For the present, however, she has found a brief respite in the rude abode of one of her father's rangers, in the area of the Hooded Crow's Gill. This location is a tenuous haven. For once the Normans summon the courage to explore the forest, the orphaned one will inevitably be in their control once again. If you can befriend her, may the God of the friendless and distressed bless you. If you can offer her a more secure shelter, the bearer of this message, whom you will surely recognize, may be trusted to lead you to the herdsman's abode. I bid you farewell with a heavy heart. Adhelm, Abbot, Monastery of... This missive duly found its way to Ragnvald, who wasted no time in embarking on a rescue mission, as I had speculated. Ragnvald summoned Gormar, and 3 horses were quickly saddled. One for Ragnvald, one for Gormar, and one for Skuggi, who was designated as the guide. "Show us the way," stated the Earl, "and stick to the hills as much as possible, since the Normans have yet to find the leisure to explore the hill country through their appetite for food, drink, and pillaging. I have no doubt that we will travel without incident." Thus instructed, the trio of horsemen set off, following the hills, where their sight could survey the valleys and lowlands with such precision that no adversary could climb steep hills within 2 miles without being spotted. In just over an hour, they arrived at the location where they had to enter the forest and lowlands. They halted for a minute or two, surveying the hillsides and meticulously scrutinizing any object that wasn't clear. Meanwhile, the curlews swept the long circle of hills and uttered their mournful cries. The hawks soared over the tops of trees, darted in and out of them to lure their prey into the open, and perched in mid-air, observing the ground below with acute vision and poised to pounce on any unsuspecting mice or tiny rabbits that ventured out. "There are no men around, at least not yet," Ragnvald uttered, "or these timid inhabitants of nature's wilderness would have betrayed them by their agitation. Lead the way, Skuggi. I trust we will face no obstacles." Skuggi strode quickly towards the lowlands, venturing into the woodland that led into the valley, where a stream rushed out of the hills, occasionally tumbling over cascades of several yards. Despite these waterfalls, an abundant presence of trout had made its way further upstream, where they thrived in each pool and resting place. Skuggi led his companions down a rocky path beside the water for some time, until the trees around them became endlessly dense. Suddenly, Skuggi turned from the path and dismounted, guiding his horse through the thicket, clearing a path through the branches as he went. Soon they arrived at a humble dwelling, belonging to the ranger whose job it was to watch over the area. It was fashioned from wood, with sturdy oak limbs serving as the basis for the frame, the bark stripped from them. The roof and sides were carefully woven from thinner branches, then covered in heather from the moor nearby. The structure was then coated in a mixture of mud and lime, creating a warm and dry space. In front of the entrance was a small area paved with smooth pebbles from the streambed, with bones from local animals intermingled amongst them. Such whimsicalities suited the designer, a child of the forest itself. As they approached, they heard quick footsteps and the sound of the door being barricaded. But as Skuggi knocked, everything fell silent. "Hello in there," Skuggi called out. "There is nothing to fear from us, only good Saxons." The ranger's wife instantly recognized Skuggi's voice and opened the door, letting the 3 travelers enter while they left their horses outside. Erica, in the meantime, listened intently with great apprehension. However,
Upon learning that they were Saxons, she emerged from her inner quarters. When she saw Ragnvald with his helmet removed, her face and neck immediately flushed with a deep crimson hue, and she nervously adjusted her clothing. "Ah," Ragnvald exclaimed as he took her hand and lightly kissed it. "Is this little Erika who used to watch us boys joust and fence with broadswords? It seems you have grown quite a bit since then." He continued, "Unfortunately, these difficult times have not afforded many opportunities for neighborly visits. It has been 3 years since I last saw you." "Ah, I understand it is a sad state of affairs," he said, as he noticed tears forming in her eyes. "But fear not, timid one. We will find a safe place where you can be hidden. We will surround you with strength and alertness, and the Normans who bring their unwelcome presence will face the consequences." Despite his kind words, Erika found herself overcome with emotion and physical tremors. Although she had endured much suffering, privation, and fear, she looked upon the armored warrior and felt as though she had found a fortress of refuge. Even the most casual observer could note the stark contrast between the two individuals. Erika, with her fair complexion, deep blue eyes, and untamed waves of golden hair cascading over her shoulders, epitomized the essence of maidenly grace, representing the ideal high-born Saxon maiden. Conversely, the Earl possessed a tall, muscular frame, a well-formed head, and a mop of curly hair, similar to that of a modern-day Hercules, who seemed to have been fashioned for this troubled period, where personal strength, unwavering bravery, and imposing presence were essential qualities required if one wished to lead others. It is not surprising that Ragnvald's voice took on a gentleness beyond his typical commanding and direct manner when addressing the fair and sorrowful maiden.
"We have learned of your hardships, miss," spoke Ragnvald, "and have arrived to extend our aid as displaced Saxons. I must admit, the quarters offered are likely to be meagre for a gentle guest. It may be unsteady and susceptible to disruption, but it shall undoubtedly provide protection if accepted." "Your kind offer is greatly appreciated, my lord. Regretfully, it is the only thing I have to repay your graciousness. I will endeavor not to be a burden on your provisions." "Now, my esteemed lady," Ragnvald addressed the ranger's wife, "you have conferred a great favor by providing asylum for this lady." "We are simply fulfilling our duty to her rightful ownership. We have long subsisted on the benefits of her father's provision and safety, and it is sorrowful to witness her present state." "May I ask where your spouse is situated?" "He is watching over Jill, my lord." "Would it be possible to have him summoned?" "Certainly, my lord. Would you like to see him?" "Indeed. Let us greet him. There may be assistance we can provide mutually." The woman retrieved a small whistle created from a plantain tree branch from the residing area and proceeded to blow a soft and distinctive note, afterward monitoring for a moment. However, no response was detected. She coughed up the same note, but a bit louder. Shortly, a trembling reaction echoed from the woods. "He will be arriving shortly," the woman informed while returning to the living quarters. Before long, the ranger entered the enclosure via the foliage, carrying a platter of fish by a string in one hand and a pheasant in the other. Bjorn had no signs of surprise on his countenance upon noticing the newcomers. "How's it going, friend? You don't seem startled," conveyed Ragnvald. "No, I've got one eye fixated on mountains and one on basins, and can sense a Saxon's steps and my old comrade Skuggy's presence in any guise." "It's safe to assume you're occupied procuring these relishes for your mistress, I presume?" "Yes, I have sent one of my trusty arrows after this delicate bird, and I have searched under a few rocks in the creek for these trout," the hunter remarked, as he tossed his quiver on the ground. "Here are 20 arrows, and every one of them is a trusted friend that never fails. I've taken immense care in rearing and testing them all. I've removed their twists as much as possible, shaved off their heads, and twisted their tails. However, they all have a will of their own when it comes to hitting the mark, but I know their minds well and can factor in what they need to hit a bullseye at 80 yards. Look at the heads of these arrows. They were crafted by Swain, the Sheffield armourer. They're all forked, which makes a tiny slit between a Norman's ribs when they penetrate. However, extracting them is difficult. I've been keeping an eye on the Jill for many days because the Normans have been scouring the forest for Saxon refugees.
This morning, Lady Luck and a crumb of comfort smiled upon me. "Oh, did you have some Normans within striking distance of your arrows this morning?" inquired someone. "Indeed I did. I even tickled a few with a long stick, but they didn't laugh, mind you." "Oh, then we want to hear your tale, Bjorn Wolfe, as we're all eager to discover how the Normans appreciate messages from our woodsmen." "Well, it happened like this. There's a little trail that leads up to our cottage from the valley. It was established before these dogs came along, and will not be leaving any new tracks for a while. As I was scouting the area this morning from the rough side of my cottage, the side facing the enemy, 3 or 4 Normans chanced upon the pathway. Of course, they assumed that there was something worth finding at the end of it. As I saw them approach, I thought to myself, 'Come on, my friends, I have something for you, and you can have it for nothing but love.' I positioned myself in the bush about 40 paces away and selected my best arrow. 'This is him,' I said, pulling one out of the quiver, still red with blood. 'I would trust my life on this arrow, for it never fails.' On they came, and I gave the arrow all the strength of my arm. It struck the foremost Norman right in the throat, and he dropped in the path. His companions didn't even stop to check on him, but turned and ran, so fast that even Skuggi couldn't have caught them. But I didn't want them to leave empty-handed, so I lodged another arrow in the buttocks of the last one. He didn't even stop to inquire what it was, but carried my arrow off with him. I suppose he's busy trying to remove it now, but it will hold its own as well as any Norman could cling to a Saxon's belongings. I've lost a good arrow over him, but it will cause him discomfort for many days to come, and he won't need anyone to scratch the wound either. My apologies for prattling on before my betters, but it's news that I take pleasure in hearing and telling." "It is indeed good news," Ragnvald replied, "and we would be glad to hear more of your tales when you have others as good as this. But tell me, my good fellow, what is this bundle of arrows in the corner?"
"These, my dear friend, are my young chargers who have not yet completed their formal education. While they are reliable in close combat, they can be a bit skittish when it comes to precise tasks, much like a wild colt. However, I will train them in due time to become unwavering stalwarts. My good wife, would you happen to have any mead or refreshments for our guests? This is Ragnvald, our sole chieftain in these parts. Surely you recall his visit to our hall when he jousted and duelled with Master Beowulf. He was a fearsome competitor in his prime. Also, allow me to introduce Gormer, a free man, and Skuggi, a lively fellow much like myself, though a servant and bondman. They are both trustworthy men, I assure you, reliable in every way. Bjorn Wolfe, if that is your name, I admire your spirit. What is your plan? Do you intend to face the Normans alone, or make an agreement with them, accepting whatever mercy they offer?" "Down with the Normans," is the cry of the Saxons now, and it has been mine since the start. I would ideally stay with the Brunasvold and the adolescent outlaws who roam with them, but that lifestyle doesn't suit women and children. Nevertheless, I must depart soon. After today's conflict, there will be no remaining here. I left that individual over yonder to discourage intruders, but it won't deter them for long. The Normans will return in great numbers, and our options will be limited. Have you heard that we have built a fortress on the hills beyond?" "Yes, indeed I have, dear friend." "If you'd like, bring your family to Tongil, where we are temporarily based. Your wife, Eadberg, will be of use to Lady Erica, and your children will be safe from danger. On another note, I see that you have a pair of falcons and a collection of fishing equipment, and I suspect that there are ferrets in your hut. Every man has his skills, and yours are a valuable asset at present. If you're willing to provide your services to our mistress and the rest of us, bring your gear with you, and you'll be granted every opportunity to display your abilities as a hunter. We won't mind if you take a shot or two at any daring Norman who sets foot on our land." "Are there any comrades of Thane Beowulf nearby, willing to take another master? If so, bring them along, for anyone who can despise the Norman conquerors and fight for the Saxon cause will be heartily welcomed. We have a venture ahead, and anyone who can shoot straight will do us good service." "Well, that's great news, for there are many housecarls of the worthy Thane who seek a more settled life than the lawless existence of the forest. There'll be a gathering of stout outlaws at the Hermit's Cave on Crowfell tonight. I'd be happy to take your message to this tryst. At our last gathering, we talked a lot about your defence of the castle. Some of these outlaws range the woods as far south as Sherwood. You can be sure the natives will be delighted to hear the news, for a dalesman likes to stay in the shadow of his hills and fells. They are as slippery as eels when they must shift for themselves, but they are stout men at a push and ready to fight. Good. Bertwulf, rouse up these folks, the more the better, for we won't play hide-and-seek with the Normans. The more of us there are, the better we can deal with them. Bertwulf's wife set a feast before the visitors, hunted and fished spoils, for Bertwulf was proficient at his profession. The visitors were also well fed, and they ate heartily. "Well, Skuggi," said Ragnvald, "you seem to enjoy the company of your new friends so much that you couldn't bear to part with them under any circumstances. So we'll have to leave you behind, and wish your friends good luck." "Indeed it is true," mused the simple fellow. "I may not possess the same grandeur and grace as the Normans, but I have my own cunning tricks, and I always come out on top. I have yet to break a bone in this endeavour." Ragnvald, Gormr, and Erika continued on their journey, with Erika riding on the spare horse. "Don't fret, my dear Erika," said Ragnvald comfortingly. "I will make a note of how the sun returns to your face each day. You'll be the sweetest-smelling flower of them all." But Erika couldn't help but feel like a burden to their company. "I fear I will be of little use to you in your struggles," she lamented. "Nonsense," rebuked Ragnvald. "You'll be just like the wildflowers, easy to care for and beautiful to look at." Erika, embarrassed, quickly changed the topic. "My lord, do you think this Norman count plans to kill all the Saxons who don't yield to him?" Ragnvald shook his head. "I cannot say what Hofsos intends, but I won't let him take advantage of us. I will speak with him and try to negotiate a peaceful solution. We must know the full extent of his intentions." "But you won't risk putting yourself in harm's way, will you?" asked Erika anxiously. "No, I won't risk it," assured Ragnvald. "I have a plan. Despite our reasons for hatred, I believe a truce on fair terms would be best for Saxons everywhere." "The land is in dire straits," agreed Erika. "Time is of the essence,